Speaking of criminal cartels, let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen from the Wall Street Journal. This is a landmark report. I want to spend some time in terms of the details. Yale, Georgetown, and other top schools, according to a new lawsuit, illegally colluded to limit student financial aid. This is very important. 16 major universities are being sued for alleged antitrust violations because of the way that they work together to determine financial aid for rewards. Now, what they show is that lawsuits representing 5 former students shows that universities engaged in price fixing and unfairly limited aid by using, and this is the key thing, a shared methodology to calculate applicants' financial need. Schools are allowed to collaborate on some of their formulas, but only if they don't consider applicants' financial need in admissions decisions. And what they show is that the suit is that they do weigh a candidate's ability to pay in certain circumstances, and therefore that formula should not be exempt from the antitrust exemption. Why does this all matter? We all know that the price of school and the inflation in education costs outstrips almost anything else in American society except for healthcare costs. Now, why exactly is that? Well, whenever they can go and deny people financial aid, then they have a select group at the top as well who they can charge whatever they want, enriching their coffers, which then leads to their endowments, which have essentially become massive hedge funds at Harvard, Yale, and all these other places. But even more important is this: by colluding in order to keep people outside of financial aid and artificially inflating their price, which is not connected whatsoever to the actual product that they deliver, what does that mean? They are knowingly putting their students in more and more debt. That's the worst part, because they are not the guarantors or have any financial incentive whatsoever in the actual debt itself. So everybody's losing on both sides of the transaction. The debtors, right, who are not ever going to be able to get repaid back, the actual people who are taking out the loans themselves, and the people who are getting filthy rich are these colleges. And the 16 universities, in using the same formula, what they're doing is making sure that the less and less students that get financial aid, then the more that they can charge and that they continue to inflate their price in the future. I don't think I can underscore enough how much of this is going to people like Harvard and Yale, who have endowments in the tens of billions of dollars, who are major investors and limited partners in venture capital funds and hedge funds. They are some of the biggest players on all of Wall Street. And nobody seems to understand that those endowments are not being used for the students. I saw some statistic where it was like Harvard could pay every one of its students' tuitions for like 1,000 years or something like that with its current endowment. It's not for their beneficiary. They don't even build, they can build enough fake new buildings all they want, and they're still becoming filthy rich on the other side. And look, it's not like each person is making millions and millions of dollars, but they're using it to fund all sorts of extraneous DEI programs and all this other stuff there. It's becoming a permanent bureaucracy, which is all artificially subsidized by a fake system. So look, it's a criminal cartel, and what do you do with criminal cartels? You break them up and you tax the hell out of them. That's what we need to do here.
Yeah, I mean, the reason these institutions are so important is because they are the pipeline to elite society in America. And, the fact that you have such a large percentage of folks who are going to the Ivy League who are already wealthy, and such a very small percent that come from lower working class citizens, that in and of itself means that you perpetuate the people who were doing well before, you funnel them through this pipeline, and they're the ones who come out on top and run the country. So that's why these institutions matter more than most. As to the cartel situation here, so back in '94, Congress apparently passed this legislation giving them certain exemptions from antitrust violations, which I don't know why they did that to start with. Actually, I have a good idea why they did that, corruption. But anyway, they give them these exemptions and say, all right, you guys can collude and price fix with regards to, the financial aid offers that you're making to students. We're going to allow that. But
which we shouldn't.
It has to, right, which you shouldn't, because what that means if you're a student, you're not going to get these schools to go into sort of like a bidding war to try to get you to come there because they've fixed the price. So you're on the short end of the stick there, ultimately. So they said, okay, you can do that, but you have to make sure that you practice need-blind admissions so that you're not taking into consideration whether a student is rich or poor when you're ultimately admitting them to the school. And what this lawsuit says is that they couldn't even abide by those rules.
Yes.
That in certain circumstances, admissions are not need blind. Specifically, lawyers said some of the schools consider financial need by giving an admission edge to children of wealthy donors. Some also weigh applicants' finances when admitting them off the waiting list and also look at finances in admission decisions to certain programs. So you got to carve out. You got to play, your little cartel price fixing games. You got a legal carve out from Congress in 1994. And what this lawsuit is saying is you could not even follow, like they already are letting you engage in anti-competitive behavior, and you couldn't even follow the basic guidelines of what we put in place for you. So, I think there's a larger conversation here about the way that the rules don't apply to these elite institutions. They get special carve-outs for Congress. Even when they get those carve-outs, they still engage in what is effectively criminal behavior with very little ever accountability on this.
Two things I also want to highlight. I didn't know this until I was researching this story. In 1991, all of the Ivy League were actually fined for participating in price fixing. And number two, in Congress, there is a law specifically that extends the antitrust exemption, which is set to expire in September unless Congress renews it.
It's going to be interesting to follow.
Exactly. I'm going to follow the hell out of this now that it's actually on my radar, which is that why should these people get that antitrust exemption? Somebody please tell me. If they're allowed to collude on financial aid, I am almost always going to say that's never going to be for the benefit of the student, which is what all of our laws on this are supposed to be. I mean, so much of what's happened in the pandemic has been so revealing to this. These people treat their students like cattle. I mean, literally in Yale, they're not allowed to go out to eat in a restaurant, even outside in the city of New Haven. There is a mass just disillusion with a lot of these universities, but the universities know they can still continue to charge whatever the hell they want. They did an entire year of Zoom school. I know people who went to the Ivy League who are in law school and they are doing all of it online and are still paying tens of thousands of dollars a month in order to attend these institutions, going into hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. All of it is the elite credential itself. And when you have such an unfair system like that, in which this deck is really stacked against the people participating in, then what they can charge and not comes down to whether this is criminal. And we have seen now, those Columbia University students, the film students going $170,000 in debt. The NYU student who we talked about here on the show who had to sell her eggs in order to make her debt payments. I saw some pushback. People were like, oh, they attended it. They knew what they were doing. Look, when you're 18 years old, $100,000, you have no idea what that even means.
Oftentimes you're talking about people who are making these decisions when they're 17
That's what I mean.
old.
I mean, their brains are not fully developed.
Yeah.
Like, you can't say that they knew what they were doing. You might say, yeah, 300 grand. You don't know what rent costs. You don't know what like a car costs or what it means in order to just live. You don't know about taxes and payroll taxes and all that stuff, take-home pay versus what you actually are supposedly getting paid on paper. These are not decisions that we can say lightly that these students knew full and well what they were doing, because that's not the case whatsoever. And the people who have made sure that they don't are these universities themselves.
Yeah, that's right. And they also were sold a bill of goods about, what the university experience was and all of those things. So I think they deserve some compassion about, they shouldn't be saddled with a lifetime full of unpayable debt. That is absolutely insane. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it, you get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.